Welcome to our YouTube channel. All began in the small Austrian village of Hafeld. Nestled among the silent hills and gray skies of early 1900s Europe, the kind of place where secrets grow like roots beneath the earth, where whispers float through the alleys long after sundown, and where monsters, if born, learn to walk unnoticed. In a modest two-story home, faded shutters clinging to cracked walls, lived the Hitler family. Alois, a stern and aging customs official, his devout and delicate wife, Clara, and their surviving children. Adolf, a moody, intense teenager who spent most of his time alone sketching war scenes and strange symbols. And Paula, his younger sister, soft-spoken and bright-eyed, who seemed to shine in contrast to her brother's shadow. To the neighbors, the siblings were just another pair of Austrian youth, orphaned too young, carrying the weight of loss on their backs like so many others in that time of famine, war, and fading empires. But inside that house, a different story was unfolding, one that would never make it into the history books, one that history itself buried under the rubble of war and the smoke of crematoriums. Paula had always loved her brother, even when he was cold, even when he snapped at her for asking questions or hovered too long over books that dripped with hatred and rage. He wasn't always like that. Once, when she had broken her arm falling from a tree, it was Adolf who carried her all the way to the town doctor, whispering comforts in a trembling voice. He used to smile when she sang, but something had changed after their father's death. Adolf became obsessed with ideas bigger than himself, race, purity, revenge, and began scribbling disturbing passages in his notebook. Quoting obscure German philosophers and ranting about the weakness of humanity, he spoke less. His eyes held less light. Paula watched as her brother drifted further into a world she couldn't reach, a storm cloud forming behind his gaze, and then one day, she decided to read the journals he kept hidden under the floorboard in the attic, the place he thought no one dared go. What she found chilled her to her core, pages and pages of twisted ideas, diagrams of death, camps, crude flags, and logos he claimed would one day fly over the world, and most terrifyingly, a list of names under the heading unclean. Among those names were their neighbors, Jews, disabled children, a Roma family, and at the bottom, in small letters, was hers, Paula. Weakness must be cut out early. She couldn't believe it. Her hands shook as she flipped through each page, reading about plans for political dominance, global cleansing, and the rebirth of an empire built on ash and blood. It was madness, but it was real. The ink was fresh. That night, she waited until their mother had gone to sleep, and confronted Adolf by the fire, where he sat hunched, carving strange marks into the wood with a dull knife. "I read them," she said quietly, "all of them." He didn't look up at first, but his hand stopped moving. The crackle of fire was the only sound. "You shouldn't have," he whispered. "Those were not for you." She tried to reason with him, tried to pull him back from the edge. "Adolf, this isn't who you are. You need help, please." But when he finally turned to face her, Paula saw a stranger. His eyes, once full of pain, were empty, almost peaceful in their emptiness. "I've seen the truth," he said calmly. "You just can't understand it yet." That night, the house was filled with the sound of breaking glass, of a scream swallowed by darkness, of silence falling too soon. By morning, Paula was gone. Their mother said she had left to stay with relatives in Vienna, but no letters ever came. No visits, no return. When asked by townspeople, Adolf would say she was ill and needed rest, and soon the questions stopped. After all, the world was growing more chaotic. The whispers of war were louder than the whispers of one missing girl. But some villagers remembered seeing Adolf dragging something wrapped in canvas out toward the woods behind the house the night Paula vanished. Others claimed to have heard strange howling in the fields like a wounded animal, and then nothing. Time passed. Clara died not long after, her health collapsing suddenly, perhaps from grief, perhaps from something darker. Adolf left Hafeld soon after, first to Vienna, where he was rejected from art school, and then to Munich, and then, eventually, to history. The world knows what came next. The rise of the Nazi Party, the fire of the Reichstag, the burning of books and bodies, the gas chambers, the marsh, the horror, 6 million Jews dead. Millions more slaughtered in the name of a vision first inked in a teenage boy's attic journal. But few ask what came before that, what spark lit that fire. Some historians argue Hitler's hatred was born of poverty or trauma or ideology. But what if it began earlier, with a single act of murder, a sister silenced not by war, but by blood and paranoia? What if the guilt of that act warped his soul beyond repair? Or worse, what if there was no guilt at all? Decades later, long after Berlin fell and the Führer's bunker turned to dust, a team of post-war researchers combing through Nazi records stumbled upon a hidden file in a box labeled "Family, Sealed." Inside were letters never sent from Clara Hitler to a cousin in Linz. One letter, dated just days after Paula's disappearance, said only, "Something terrible has happened. I fear for what he's becoming." But the cousin died before she could respond. The file was quietly archived and forgotten. But the question remained, buried beneath the rubble of history. Did Adolf Hitler murder his own sister before he murdered millions? Was the greatest evil of the 20th century not born in war rooms or battlefields, but in a quiet home? In the moment one sibling turned on another, not out of hate but to protect a secret vision of the world no one else could see. In the silence of that Austrian village, among the forgotten graves and faded memories, one can still feel it, a ghost story more terrifying than fiction because it might be true. A tale of love turned to fear, of genius turned to madness, of a sister who saw the devil growing inside her brother and tried to stop it, and of a boy who chose silence over salvation. For history is not only written in victories or defeats, but in the quiet moments no one saw, the crimes never punished, the graves unmarked. And perhaps the greatest monster the world ever knew was made not in battle, but in the moment he killed the only person who ever truly loved him and never looked back. Subscribe for more videos. Story Nest AI.